EMP Series, Day 166. Tyler Hobbs, disillusioned with the recent developments of the situation and the realization that Major Stillman was pushing his own agenda, decided to pay Carl Fairley a visit. Tyler was committed to do whatever it took to get rid of the military presence in the region, even if it meant joining forces with Carl. Of course, he could never let Carl find out that he was responsible for the attacks and the killings of the past few weeks. But now, it seemed that they had a common enemy. He rode out to Carl's homestead and found nobody there. He knew he had a remote hunting lodge, and even though he had only been there a couple times decades ago, he still remembered how to get there. He decided to go up there and see if Carl and his family were there. Several hours later, as night began to fall, he crested a ridge high in the mountains above Carl's homestead. As he stopped and looked down into a clearing several hundred yards below, he noticed smoke rising from the chimney in the old lodge building. He also saw the horses grazing in the meadow beyond. As he sat there on his horse, contemplating his next move, a hardwood axe handle came smashing down across his shoulders and back. He fell from his horse and was knocked unconscious. When he finally came to, he saw Carl sitting next to him against a large tree. Carl looked in his direction and commented, "I was wondering when you were going to wake up. I thought I'd killed you there for a minute." He chuckled. Tyler rubbed the back of his neck and said, "Carl Fairley, why in the heck did you do that?" Carl responded, "How this works right now, right here, I'll ask you the questions. You don't ask me anything. You just answer. What are you doing here? Who sent you? And what makes you think you'll be getting out of here alive? This is my land you're on, and in these uncertain times, I'd be justified just to shoot you for trespassing." Tyler let out a kind of laugh and grunt combo and told Carl, "Brother, I got news for you. Nobody's getting out of here alive." Carl kicked him in the thigh and said, "Answer my question, Hobbs." "Oh, so you do remember me," Tyler retorted. "I came here to talk to you. Nobody sent me. And as I just said, nobody's getting out alive. So I have no unrealistic expectations for my future." "Well, you're here, and I'm here, so talk." Tyler explained to Carl about the vote that the board took to expel Major Stillman and his troops from the region. Carl chuckled and told Tyler that Major Stillman wasn't going anywhere, no matter what the board had voted. Tyler then told Carl that he believed that Carl wanted the military gone almost as much as he did, and he suggested they work together. Lee was planning on heading toward the church. He thought about Hammer and how Buddy had left him in jail to rot. Should he go in and break him out? Could he? It was risky. Hammer would surely ask about Buddy and where he was. If he couldn't bring Hammer on board with what he had done to Buddy, what then? No, he thought. Just walk away and don't take the chance. Still, though, the thought of leaving him behind nagged at him. Hammer was his brother in the MC. It was a bond that went deeper than blood. Still, though, so was Buddy, and Lee didn't have an ounce of regret for how that turned out. He walked out of the woods onto the backside of the row of buildings that lined the main road and railroad tracks. He made his way cautiously and quietly toward the jail. He peered through the window to see that Hammer was, in fact, alone in the jailhouse. Truth be told, this is the second day that Carl Fairley would not be in his office at all. Hammer quietly and cautiously made his way around front, making sure that nobody saw him as he slipped into the jail. He walked through the large room that was adjacent to the long hallway that led to Carl's office. He entered the room in the rear that housed the cells. Hammer was happy to see his friend and asked if Buddy had sent him to free him. Lee walked right up to the cell and told Hammer, "We have to act quickly. Somebody could come in here at any moment. Buddy did not send me. In fact, Buddy's dead, bro." Hammer looked at Lee and asked him what had happened. Lee, never being one to beat around the bush, and at this moment feeling a real sense of urgency, just blurted it out. "I killed him." Hammer looked at him. He was seemingly in a state of shock and disbelief. Of course, he had many questions for Lee, but at this moment he just asked, "How did it happen?" Lee looked Hammer square in the eye and said, "I just did it. It wasn't anything I planned. I reached the point where I wasn't going to live my life this way anymore. I wanted to be free. I am free, and so can you be, bro. No more doing the bidding of the MC leadership. No more long, miserable assignments, spending nights camping out in the cold and rain. Come on, Hammer. Don't try to tell me you never dreamed of doing it yourself." Hammer immediately responded, "No, I never did. I mean, sure, we've all had that fleeting moment of dreaming about getting out. But then I realized this is my home, my life, the life I chose. It hasn't been all that badly. It's not without its challenges and bad times, but overall, it's the life I know, the life I've committed to." Lee stood before Hammer, quiet. He was disappointed by his reaction, but he knew it was a strong possibility going in. Somewhere inside, he had hoped that Hammer would be happy Buddy was gone, that he would rejoice with Lee and embrace the newfound freedom that they both could enjoy. But then, if he was completely honest with himself, he knew deep down that Hammer would react this way. That was the very reason that his first instinct was to just walk away and leave him. He stood in silence for a long moment, Hammer pacing back and forth anxiously in his cell. Finally, Hammer stopped and looked at Lee once again. "You're a traitor to this organization. We should have known from the way you joined us that you would never truly be loyal. You do know that the club will never stop coming for you. You think you're free? Ha! That's a joke. You'll never be free." Then he spit on him. Lee turned to walk out. He drew the .45 he took from Buddy, and as he stood frozen there for a moment, he said to Hammer, "I'm truly sorry you feel this way. I am free, and so could you have been, my friend." With that, he spun around and fired a single shot, hitting him square between the eyes. As he fell dead on the cell floor, Lee had a tear in his eye. Before he started back toward the door, he heard commotion in the front room. The deputy was coming in with lunch when he heard the shot. He charged in with his gun drawn and trained in front of him. Lee instinctively fired twice, killing the deputy before he even had a chance to fix on his target. He knew that someone would surely hear the 3 shots and come to investigate. In fact, 2 soldiers that were on duty on the platform were already on their way. Lee picked up a chair and swung it through a window that faced out to the rear of the building. He used it to clear the glass completely from the opening and quickly climbed through and out into the alley behind the building. By the time the soldiers got to the window and looked out, Lee was gone. It wouldn't be long before the body of Buddy Tanner would be discovered in the drainage culvert. Lee wasted no time, putting as much distance between himself and the town as he could. Lieutenant Saunders was going over the scene, collecting evidence, when Major Stillman walked into the jail and surveyed the scene. Before he had a chance to speak, a soldier came bursting in. He informed Lieutenant Saunders and the major that a body had been discovered along the road in a culvert. "Murdered," he said. "From the looks of it, sometime in the last 24 hours. The major looked at Lieutenant Saunders and said, "Where on earth is Carl Fairley?" Captain Nunez, sitting on the train platform reading a newspaper, but not really reading a newspaper, watched the entrance to the jail and Carl's office. He was wondering the exact same thing. When Lieutenant Saunders went back to his office, he sorted through the mail that the clerk had placed on his desk. On it, he found an envelope addressed to him with no return address or any other info on it. He opened it, and it read, "Meet me at the diner at 1400 hours. It was signed Captain Kearns. Captain Kearns did not exist. The man who had sent the note was, in fact, Edwin Nunez. In his dealings with Lieutenant Saunders, he had assumed an alias. If things went sideways or if Saunders wasn't on board with the recruitment in the final stages, when the mission was revealed to him, Nunez could just walk away without a trace. As Lieutenant Saunders read the note, he looked around nervously to make sure nobody was watching him. At 2 p.m., he was seated at the counter in the diner, eating a cheeseburger and sipping on an iced tea, when he looked at his watch for the 5th time and noticed it was now 3:30. An angry Lieutenant Saunders got up and headed for the door. As he stepped toward the door, a man wearing khaki pants and a black hoodie pulled the door open for him. In a quiet voice, as they passed, he said, "Captain Kearns wants you to meet him at the train trestle in 1 hour. Come alone." He walked into the diner without missing a step. Major Stillman walked into the building that housed his office. As he walked past the clerk on his way to his office, he asked him if he had seen Carl Fairley yet. The clerk told him that nobody had seen Carl in 2 days, and also that all his horses were gone from the corral where he was keeping them. The major was furious. He pounded his fist on the counter and yelled, "Find Carl Fairley!" 1 hour after Lieutenant Saunders left the diner, he was sitting in his Jeep on the road that dead-ended adjacent to the blown-up trestle, where the train was now forced to stop. As he looked around at the site, it was clear to him that he was alone there. He got out of the Jeep and went over to the tree line to relieve himself. When he buttoned up his trousers and turned around, he saw Captain Nunez standing in front of him. Startled, he stiffened up and said, "What the? It's you, the guy from the diner. Where's Captain Kearns?" Nunez replied, "I am Captain Kearns, Lieutenant. Get in the Jeep. Let's take a ride." The two men climbed into the Jeep and off they went. Lieutenant Saunders asked Nunez where they were going. Captain Nunez just told him to drive down along the river. When they came to a turnoff on the side of the road where fishermen would pull off the park, Nunez instructed Saunders to turn in. It was a secluded spot. Nunez briefed Lieutenant Saunders on Section 7 and the work that they did throughout the world, and eventually got to the part about what had brought them to this area and how they needed him specifically to help watch and investigate a member of the military there. He explained that it was a high-ranking member of the command who they were watching for quite some time now. How they knew he was involved in various activities that were of national security interest, but so far had been unable to get close enough to get hard evidence against him. "That's where you come in," he told Lieutenant Saunders. He paused to let Saunders absorb it all. After a brief moment, Lieutenant Saunders looked at Nunez, the man he knew as Captain Carnes, and said, "It's Major Stillman, isn't it?" Nunez wasn't ready to give him specifics, and he just replied, "I can't tell you that yet, Lieutenant. We have to know you're on board before I can give you any mission specifics. I'm sure you understand." "Yes, of course," said the lieutenant, thinking to himself, "It has to be Stillman." The thought of helping them prove a case against the major and taking him down pleased Saunders. He couldn't hold back the emotion that he suppressed into a slight grin. Then Nunez ran down the details of Saunders' recruitment. He told him that he would remain in the military command and continue to draw pay and benefits. However, he would report directly to Nunez, and he must commit his full loyalty to Section 7. He explained again the work that they did throughout the world and the sensitive nature and importance of their work here. Then he looked him right in the eyes to make sure he understood, as he said, "Lieutenant, you will effectively be leaving your commission with the Army, resigning for all intents purposes. As I said, you'll continue to draw pay and benefits. You'll continue to get up every day and put on the uniform and perform your duties as described by your command here. But you will be working for us, for Section 7. Make no mistake, son. Your loyalty and responsibility must be to us. When this current mission is over, or at any time we feel it necessary, you can be ordered to walk away with no prior notice and proceed to a new assignment. At some point, your service may even require you to disappear from existence. That can mean severing any and all future connections to family, friends, and loved ones. Section 7 will own you in ways that go far beyond the hold that the Army has on you. I need you to know this is not a job that you can just quit at any time. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Lieutenant?" Lieutenant Saunders thought about it for a moment and said, "Yes, sir, I understand. Do you need an answer right now, or can I have some time?" Nunez was pleased that he wanted some time to think about it. That showed him that Saunders understood the weight of it all, that he was not jumping in impulsively, that the extent and duration of his commitment to Section 7 would go far beyond the current issue of Major Stillman. "Yes, Lieutenant. We don't have a lot of time to waste, son, but consider it seriously, and I'll contact you for an answer in 48 hours. Saunders nodded and started up the Jeep, and the two men drove back toward town. When they were about a mile out of town, Nunez instructed Saunders to stop the Jeep. He hopped out and said, "See you in a couple days, Lieutenant," and he walked into the woods. Carl Fairley walked into Major Stillman's office, where the Major was seated at his desk. "I hear you've been looking for me, Stillman," he said. Major Stillman got up and walked around the desk to face Carl. "Where have you been, Constable?" he asked. Carl replied, "Well, not that it's any of your business, but I took a couple days off to spend time with family. What's up? The trooper that told me you were looking for me made it seem kind of urgent." "Constable, I'm not a man to beat around the bush. Let me get straight to the point. As I told you previously, the military needs horses. We are requisitioning all you can provide under the new laws, which entitle us to do so. I went by the corral and saw that it was empty. Have you moved the horses?" "Well, Major, as I told you, we will not be selling the military any horses. We got rid of a couple to fulfill agreements that we had previously. The rest of the ones we currently have are spoken for also, and will be transferred when they are ready. We get fair market value in trade or monetary considerations for our stock, Major. We will not be forced into selling them to you at an extremely reduced rate, even if you have created laws to try to compel us to do so." "Well, Constable, then I'm afraid you're in direct violation to the law, refusing to fulfill our order." Carl cut him off. "No, actually, Major, I have not refused your order. The requisition you gave me ordered me to transfer ownership of any and all available stock to your command. As I have explained to you, we have no available stock. All our stock was committed to deals that were drafted before we received your requisition. So you see, Major, I'm not refusing to comply. At this time, I am simply unable to comply." Then Carl reached into his coat pocket and produced a document that he handed to the Major. "This is an injunction granted by a federal judge which puts a cease and desist order in place against you, preventing you from seizing any current stock that we now have." Major Stillman read the injunction and rubbed his temples. "Well, Carl, this is clearly questionable. But I'm sure you already know that by the time we bring a challenge in court, the horses will be already transferred, and it really won't matter at that point." He sat back down at his desk, rereading the injunction. "While this stops us from taking the current stock, it does make provisions to fulfill the law by granting us our rights, going forward with any new stock in the future. So I guess you won this battle, Constable, but we will be doing business in the future with your next round of stock." He crumpled up the document with a smirk on his face and tossed it into the trash can. "You're dismissed, and you can remove yourself from my office directly." Carl started for the door. He stopped and turned to face the Major again. "Well, Major, that all depends. I'm not sure if the horse-raising business is for me. We may be getting out of that business. Oh, and I read the board meeting minutes from the other night. It looks as though you are the one being dismissed." With a smirk of his own, he turned and started again for the door. Major Stillman erupted in rage and stood up and yelled, "We will see about all that. This isn't over yet. Get out of my office." With that, Carl turned to face the Major once again. "Yes, Major, this surely is not over. But I think it's best we table these discussions until such a time as you are able to regain your self-control." As he walked away, he heard a glass vase whiz by his head and saw it shatter to pieces as it hit the door jamb in front of him. He smiled broadly and walked out.